Thank you so much, Rick, and hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you. I really always enjoy meeting so many interesting people at all these meetings, so thank you. A few minutes ago, as always happens, there was a micro change, and Rick convinced me to start setting the context by showing you the video that describes what the center does. And luckily for my throat and my cold, it doesn't require words. So. So, Rick, you know, I knew we were going to get along quite well when I saw that you dared mention on your bio that you had shared the stage with Janis Joplin. So I was thinking, finally someone who's not afraid of being different. Thank you. So, let's talk about character in particular. And you recall seeing this slide in the video, right? Financial instability, climate change, personal privacy, all the challenges we're facing as a humanity. And really at the bottom of it all is our human interdependency. And this interdependency was heavily tested. Would you recognize this? Ebola, thank you. A few months ago, we all thought, oops, we all realized this can be anywhere in 24 hours. And when we saw the response of even the most sophisticated medical systems, we realized even Greenland may not be far enough. So we're all interdependent. And I wish we had this concept in us a lot more strongly, a lot more systematically, to break down the tribal mindset that has inhabited us through evolution. And sometimes I wish that we could be assembled again as a tribe because of, well, another tribe, right? So you always have this feeling that unless there's a threat coming from elsewhere, we're not going to assemble enough for our own survival, which is a little odd. So it puts technology in a difficult place because it's an amplifier of human abilities and human mindsets. So do you recognize the first quote? Who said that? Any guess? All right, I'll show you a picture. Any guess now? And how about the second one? Oppenheimer. Yeah. And so yes, it is, of course, an amplifier of bad things, but it's also an amplifier of good things, right? And this is going back to Archimedes. Give me a lever, a fulcrum, and a place to stand, and I will move the world. So I'm sure that when the wheel was invented, someone said, yeah, sure, but I'd rather walk. Fine, but the person who used the wheel was able to go faster, carry heavier loads with less fatigue, and so on and so forth. So yes, let's not throw the baby with the bathwater. There are also enormous advances due to technology, and it's up to us to be wise enough to harness it and not let it run with us. So very quickly in terms of definition, because as we talk about words that matters, by character we mean this slew of things that people talk about. Agency, aptitudes, dispositions, temperament, values, and certainly also the mouthful social and emotional skills. A couple of terms we have to ban: non-cognitive. Please, there's nothing non-cognitive about anything we do, pretty much. And soft skills, because there's nothing soft about these things. So those are banned, and we're using character as a catch-all for all these concepts. Okay. UNESCO gets in the game, everyone is getting in the game, even as far back as 1996, saying that there's a need to place renewed emphasis on moral and cultural dimensions of an education. It's not enough to just know, you have to figure out how you behave in the world. And even movies, just for fun here. Today you have to think like a hero merely to behave like a decent human being. I'm riding on the brand of Sean Connery in this case. So why should formal education systems teach character? Why not leave it to society, parents, et cetera, Well, it turns out that the structures that have cared for it have weakened. And so we have situations emerging of, corruption or religious fundamentalism and so on and so forth that are really testing the lack of character education for the past few decades. So when we started looking at what makes a 21st century education, we quickly converged onto this model to try to simplify it all in 4 dimensions. Not that we love having 4, we have preferred fewer, but bear with me. On the knowledge side, we're talking about, of course, traditional knowledge, but also modern knowledge, such as robotics and synthetic biology, and wellness, and social systems, and on and on. We're talking about skills, meaning how we use that knowledge, and that means creativity, communication, collaboration, critical thinking, the 4 C's. And then character, which I'll disclose in a moment, but then underlying it all is a concept of meta-learning, self-directed learning through growth mindsets and metacognition, your ability to reflect and adapt. All the more critical in a century where we're challenged by the pace of evolution. And so on the character side, after 3 years of work and a conference in Geneva, we converged onto these 6 from which you can generate pretty much everything that people are talking about in the literature. And throughout this presentation, I'm going to show you examples of these 6 applied to engineering in particular. So for those of you who are far from the screen, it's about mindfulness, curiosity, courage, resilience, ethics, and leadership. So, and to make it even harder for you to read, just to say we have done our homework, these 6 concatenate a slew of other words and concepts that people are talking about. And coming up with something that's succinct yet complete, trust me, is a challenge. And one quick parenthesis. Don't assume that all this has to happen within the confines of a classroom or a school for that matter. Are we really going to be teaching courage only by reading Greek texts? Although that requires a certain amount of courage in ancient Greek. But clearly, we're talking about behavior modification, and that's going to have to happen in the real world with being tested by real circumstances. So, let's talk about each one of the 6. The mindful engineer. The mindful engineer might be asking herself or himself, what are the consequences of my actions on myself and society? Intended and unintended consequences. Okay, so here's the unintended part that puzzled me recently. So back when I was working at Analog Devices, we were very involved with the GSM standards, and at the time, you know, carriers were talking about the interstitial bandwidth left between voice channels, and you know, that was for free. What do we do with that? Oh, well, we can just throw in 128 bytes, and send characters around. Meh, we didn't know why that mattered, but fine, if they want to do it, they can. And it costs literally, you know, 5 zeros, 1 penny cent. And they charge you 50 cents per. And you're sending 1 trillion a year. You collectively, we collectively. Yeah. So I thought, at first we thought, okay, it's chit-chat, hi, and then it's, hi honey, I'm late because of traffic. And then it starts changing society. And realized, whoa, now I'm not sure whether people are going to show up at my party because they may have a better offer at the last second. It's changing society. 128 bytes, totally unintended. And this erosion of commitment due to this and other similar technologies is puzzling. Well, so what are your own examples? I'm really curious. What have you encountered that had unintended consequences? Yes? The ARPANET, thank you. A huge one, obviously. What else? Yes? Education. Yes, good point. Third?
iPhone cameras.
iPhone cameras. Yeah. And on and on. If I give you enough time, you'd come up with at least half a dozen each. So, but just to make you reflect on how these things change society, and sometimes we're unfortunately asleep at the wheel. Now there's the intended side. There's the intended side. How many of you have watched the movie Her? So where this artificial intelligence operating system basically becomes his companion, that and 638 other people simultaneously. But he was special. And this mindset of playing on human emotions deliberately, which you see, for example, with anthropomorphic robots being developed as companions. Good aspects of it, bad aspects to it. How about Tesla? I'll let you read. Wait, you haven't seen the best. This is the legalese, right? Here's the reality. Can you read at the back, or should I read for you? So it was pushed to every car in the fleet, demoed to journalists on urban roads, never mind the limited access highways, and no sensors sensing whether you're keeping your hands on the steering wheel or not, just go for it. So basically, the beta debug mindset is pervading now the car industry. Wonderful. It's going to redefine what a crash means. We used to think of computers crashing, and it's going to be fascinating to see it not just a metaphor anymore. So then there's the curious engineer who asks herself or himself, how can I look at something differently? So here's something fascinating that Isaac Asimov dug out. A number of postcards that were designed in France in 1899 by Jean-Marc Coté, describing how a few shots of what the year 2000 would look like. And in this case, the automatic cleaning machine. And the engineer looks at this, first generation, says, yes, I could design something anthropomorphic, but why should it be this way? Or, ta-da, this way. It doesn't have to look and act like a human. It's just doing a function. How about this? You know, the automatic tailor. That is, does it have to cut fabric, or could it simply grow fabric? So note that in both cases there was a complete transition. There was a discontinuity. It was not just improving on an existing process. It was also just jumping to a completely different type of process. And that discontinuity is really hard to forecast. How about this one? This one I chose for you, Rick. The mechanical orchestra, and that becomes, ta-da, the synthesizer. I chose a Korg also, vintage, analog, polyphonic though. And then there's a courageous engineer. The courageous engineer that says, I think I can, like the little engine that can. And I think I can what? I think I can tackle the grand challenges. And you're all familiar with them from the National Academy of Engineering, from making solar energy economical to enhancing virtual reality to, yes, advancing personalized learning. How about overriding management? Having the courage to override management. You all recognize the shuttle disaster. You remember where you were that day, at least those of you who were born. So yeah. And how about allowing 13-year-olds to go on Tinder? Shouldn't you be overriding management? And how about this? I gotta show you the video.
Nu muri, merge. Ascultă la mine că merge. Merge, am încredere în ea. Ți-am zis că am încredere în ea.
So what this is this brilliant guy in Romania who decided to fool the Mercedes autopilot system by rigging a plastic bottle on the steering wheel and goes to the back seat and terrorizes his girlfriend that way. So, okay, that's a fascinatingly bad decision to which, you know, you want to say, keep that Darwin Award to yourself. Don't share it with that poor lady. If you want to knock yourself out of the gene pool, do so elegantly, please. Don't endanger others. Then there's the resilient engineer. The resilient engineer says, I don't just think I can, I know I can, and I'll let you read this. By Rudyard Kipling, and if you have seen the first sentence, it's because you've remembered it from Wimbledon. It's right there for all to see. And then my highly significant other, Carol, suggested that I give you stories of resilient engineers, and she manages to send me a paper she found from Carnegie Mellon looking at resilience in engineering. And then I looked over it, and this is what I found in it, which is really trying to teach the concept of recursiveness. You know, it's resilient. It takes resilience just to go over the diagram about resilience. And so that's this recursive thing that they're trying to teach somehow without realizing. So that will serve as a story about resilience. And then there's the ethical engineer, and there's a lot to do there. Right? Just because I can doesn't mean I must. Can I give myself the time to think? So the National Society for Professional Engineers has in its canons holding paramount the safety, health, and welfare of the public. Well, how is this interpreted? There's software now that allows your personality to be analyzed according to the Big Five temperament profile via your tweets. And you think, okay, that's annoying, but what if this was done in public without you agreeing to it in front of your boss, which has happened at a meeting I had hosted at Harvard where this got demoed, And the IT person there was outed, in a sense, by being resistant to change. Thank you, right in front of her boss. Nice. Or Facebook. All your likes. Every time you click on a like, and eventually it analyzes what you think, what you're about, including your sexual preferences and everything else. And again, you're thinking, well, I have nothing to hide, except that you could be homosexual in Uganda, and you'd better be hiding it because you're going to be killed. So these things have severe consequences. It's not trivial. So let's just take the time to think this through. Again, just because we can doesn't mean we should. And then there's the privacy aspects, right? Governments, plus more or less benevolent, hackers, generally not benevolent, and corporations. I'm not so sure it's benevolence either. And so, are we that comfortable having so much information amassed about us and cross-referenced without our permission? So just to remind you, just because it's legal doesn't make it necessarily just. So very often we hide behind legalities, but the reality is it could be completely unjust. Just because it's a law doesn't make it just. And then there's the bioethics side, right? Bioethics is getting out of the way of CRISPR research. So CRISPR, just very quickly, is a very, very inexpensive gene editing system that is absolutely revolutionizing gene editing. So literally for a few $100s, any one of you could be editing genes. Great. So talk about the axe in the hands of everybody. Well, you think, well, so what's the problem with that? Well, these dogs, 2 days ago, were announced as having twice the muscular mass of their, the same breed. They was genetically engineered to have twice the muscular mass. Now, of course, you could say, well, we could have spent a few generations and evolved them that way. That's what we've been doing with dogs. After all, they don't look like wolves anymore. But what if it was for more, how can I say, debatable purposes? For instance, eugenics. Okay, so you start selecting people for intelligence. You analyze the DNA of 1,000 people, and then you try to see if there's something you can find out, and then start manipulating the embryo's DNA. Well, before you think that's still science fiction, there's an effort at the Beijing Genomics Institute that has started doing that. So, again, could we just stop and think? How about body parts, right? Just because you could grow a body part inside a pig or worse, someone else. Or chimeras. Again, you could literally grow things as part of animals. What's the ethics of that? Do we really have complete control over everything? How about environmental ethics? How many planets do you think we have in replacement? You want to suggest a number? Amory, since you're here. How many planets do we have as a replacement? 1. Good. And of course, you've all seen The Martian, and you saw how difficult it was for him to grow anything there. So I guess we're stuck with this one for the time being. And then there's the RoboEthics. And of course, a lot of you have read science fiction, including Asimov's 3 laws of robotics, which I'll remind you of here. A robot may not injure a human or allow a human to become to harm. Must obey the orders given by human beings unless they conflict with the first law. And protect its own existence, as long as not in contradiction with the first 2. Sounds fine. So how do you think this exemplifies it? Unless, of course, it's only battling other robots. How about nanotechnology? The gray goo problem. If you create nanobot assemblers, they go out of control, and you don't have replication limited code. So now you're stuck, and it's proliferating, and it takes over everything. It's still a science fiction scenario. But just think about the consequences. And again, what happens in the hands of psychopaths, nihilists? What if they don't care, actually, about destroying everything? Great. Oof, okay, and now the engineer as leader. So how about bringing in a mindset of engineering into social entrepreneurship? And the gasp is mine, politics. It seems far-fetched, but I would love a politician to understand what an exponential does when we talk about global warming, for instance. That at some point it becomes completely irretrievable. I would love that. I'd love a politician to understand what happens with Ebola due to an exponential. I would love for politicians to understand concepts like feed-forward versus feedback. Feedback means you've already seen the data, and you have to now work at correcting it, and sometimes you can't. It's too hard to correct the data, versus preventing the data, like we did in year 2000 with the bug, the computer bug. And everyone thought it was a non-event. Gladly, I'm so glad it was a non-event. That was the point. So wouldn't you want these concepts to be understood by the entire population, including the people you put in power? And so when I say, can we just think, I keep saying, can we just think? Could we be more interdisciplinary? Could we try to prepare for the anticipated, and that includes hacking? We know everything is going to be hacked, just by design, pretty much. And then things that cannot be anticipated, let's at least develop fast reaction times to feed back what we cannot feed forward. And question, I know Rick has so much time on his hands, you know, is there a role for Olin above and beyond all the other things that you're doing for humankind? And so, as we've been talking about unintended consequences and so on and so forth, I want to finish with a few of these postcards from 1899, just for fun, and show you how things have progressed and how discontinuities occurred and how all of these things interplay. So you recognize, of course, the landline phone, but at the time, they didn't think that Maxwell and Hertz and Marconi could come into play, and all of a sudden, we go wireless. The discontinuity. Or video telephony. Not bad for 1899. Seriously. Of course, it looks kludgy, it looks mechanical with relays and so on, but the concept was there. I don't know what kind of bandwidth they would have, better than Comcast, perhaps. And then the harvester. The harvester, right? This is not far-fetched at all. Just replace now the human with a GPS system, and there you have it. Of course, the human was in the harvester. And just look at this. The architect is building the building. So where comes the discontinuity? 3D printing the building. Other than that, that cage is on the top of the crane. Not bad for 1899. And here's the barber shop. So what have we created along those lines? The electric shaver. But I don't know how we're going to take it to the next step, where I don't have to hold the shaver. That's going to be interesting. You put your head in something and I don't know. And then one of my favorites, this is e-learning. In 1899, you crank the books, and somehow you hear the books. It's not that far-fetched. I mean, we've had, you know, language labs that looked very similar to this. And, you know, edX is a step forward, but we're not fully there yet. And how about this? Now, this is fascinating, and this is definitely worth a movie plot, in my opinion. How about these things occur, they exist, where you have your personal learning assistant, and we hack into them, and we start feeding you the information we want. And of course, since it's coming from your PLA, you don't think twice about accepting it, or perhaps you should. And lastly, another favorite, heating yourself up with radium. Sounded like a good idea at the time. It had a couple of minor flaws that were detected, but it was a good idea. So, okay, I'm going to leave you with just a couple of things here. really, at the end of it all, it's a question of wisdom, because even what's ethical is not necessarily wise, right? You know, would you say a lie to save 1,000 people, save 1,000 people's lives? It's not necessarily ethical. Is it wise? So, yes, we have a ton of information, and we're actually still starting for wisdom. And this is how you can visualize it. This is what I wish to all of us. Yes, there's information. Yes, there's knowledge and understanding, the connections, understanding what goes on. And then in the end, there's a final simplification. It's reminiscent of Saint-Exupéry, who said, you're done writing when there's nothing left to remove. And perhaps it's the same here. You've become wise when there's nothing left to clutter you. So I thank you very much.
Thank you, Charles.